In 2024, I traveled to 11 countries and still made progress, hitting new strength gains despite being all over the world. That didn't happen by sticking to a perfect routine. It happened because I built a framework that works anywhere, and oftentimes even without a gym. It's the same approach I use for myself and with my clients who are constantly on the road. And it works even if you've only got 60 to 90 minutes a week. In this video, I'll break down exactly what the framework looks like, and more importantly, how you can start using it as early as today or on your next trip, so you can keep your momentum instead of starting over every time you travel. Okay, so you travel for work, and every time you come back home, you feel like you got hit by a truck. You know, you were doing so good with your workouts, you were eating better, you had this whole routine thing figured out, and then bam, you know, a business trip comes up, and suddenly you're back to square one. But here's the thing that nobody tells you about staying fit while traveling is that it's never about being perfect, even when you're home. If everything just flies out the window the second you actually leave home, you haven't actually addressed the root cause in the first place. You know, there's no momentum to be found. You might have just invested 2 or 3 months with a health coach or a trainer, which is very common when you do have those bouts at home, especially when, for those people who have a busy schedule. And then all that hard work to push the rock up the hill, only for it to just fall straight back down. And then what? You don't have the drive to, even get the ball rolling again. And what happens is you're actually making it so much harder on yourself. Why would you want your confidence to dip after a trip? You think the problem is the trip itself, but what really is the problem 9 out of 10 times is the relationship to change and the desire to escape into that ease and that comfort. And the reason that's a problem is the setup has no ease to begin with. That's not a fitness problem. That's going to be more of a behavioral problem. And here's the actual psychology behind it. So as humans, we're actually wired to crave certainty and routine. Like, this is evolutionarily, how we developed. We love routine because that's how we stayed alive for thousands of years. So way back when, our ancestors lived in, small tribes, small groups, and had to hunt for food and find shelter every day. And what happened is they created patterns. Like, they would hunt on some days, they would rest on other days, because it kept them strong, it kept them alive, and it allowed them to feed their village. And they followed the different hunting patterns of the different animals. And the brain that we have today is the same brain back then. It learned from doing the same things in the same way, which ultimately meant safety. Change meant danger if something was out of the ordinary. So it's only normal to feel this type of discomfort when things change. So when you travel, you have different time zones, you're in different hotels, you have weird schedules, your brain just thinks, biologically, it's like, what's going on? There's some sort of subconscious danger, and we have to look out for ourselves and settle for that comfort, which means security. And when it comes to our fitness, if your workouts only work at home in the perfect setup, any little change is gonna feel scary and overwhelming. And when we feel overwhelmed, we quit. It's actually a hardwiring in our brains that we have to override. But the thing is that quitting isn't neutral. It actually digs a deeper hole, because now we have to use twice the energy, we have to have twice the discipline and twice the confidence to just climb back out of that hole and to even get started and to push that rock up the hill again. So the root cause almost always isn't travel. It's about building those habits that work more than just at home. Habits that can actually survive change. And to that point, momentum is everything. And that's the point of this video, is how do we make sure we keep that momentum going? If even 20% of your routine on the road keeps that rock from sliding, then we know we have kept the ball moving. It doesn't matter if you don't do it perfectly. That's not the point at all. It just matters that we don't kill that momentum. Because the people who win in fitness, aren't the ones that nail every workout. They're not smarter than you. They're not more disciplined than you. It's just making sure they apply the right framework. And when they do it so much, it becomes subconscious. So they don't even think about it. So the discipline becomes subconscious, because obviously if you're a high performer, you travel a lot, you're gonna have that natural sense of discipline. It's just making sure it's applying it to that framework when it comes to your health and fitness. The people who stay on it are the ones that don't let that momentum just die to zero. And so here's why this matters so much, okay? So every time you quit and restart, like I said, you're not just losing your fitness, you're gonna be training your brain that you can't handle that change, or you're teaching yourself that when things get hard or difficult, that your health no longer becomes a priority. And that's what happens. We make time for what we prioritize, and then that becomes a pattern for other things. Your business might be, locked in, you might be hitting your deadlines and you might be making your calls early in the morning, but your work stress might be adding up, your sleep might be getting ruined, there might be other issues relationship wise, whatever it is. Like, these things do overlap in different aspects of our life. So when we keep going, even when things are messy, we're actually building that confidence to tell us that we can handle whatever life throws at us. And it signals that from an identity standpoint, we don't deprioritize how we feel mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. Like, we always keep that top of mind so that we can actually perform at our best. So then the question becomes, fundamentally, how do we actually override that biological hardwiring to, not see change as danger? And here's what I call the ABC framework. So it's a simple framework. Think like a caveman that has a backup plan, or our hunter-gatherer ancestors who had a backup plan when the flock of animals wasn't in the usual spot. They had more than one way to get food or to stay safe. They had plan A, plan B, or plan C. And, like I said, when the usual hunting spot didn't have certain animals, they knew other places to look. And when winter came, they might have had backup shelters. And we need to actually apply the same principles when it comes to staying and keeping that momentum in our fitness routines. And what it really breaks down to is breaking it down to our home routine, our travel routine, and then having that emergency routine, which is basically just like a consolidated version of the travel routine. The trick is to practice plan B and plan C before we ever need them. That way our brain stops seeing change as danger when it knows exactly what to do when you're in a certain situation. So when you go on the trip, you're not caught blindsided and you think you have to do that perfect plan that your trainer, your health coach gave you back home. But in reality, no, you already know exactly what the modified routine is going to look like. So again, it's not about being perfect. It's always about just having a next move. Okay. So let me show you what this actually looks like for me. So at the time of recording this video, my plan A when I'm home is I have a 4-day-a-week resistance training split. Okay, so I do upper body one day, lower body, upper body, lower body. These are typically 60 to 70-minute sessions when I have the ability to completely plan out my days, have the full equipment available, whatever it may be. My plan B, when I actually go on travel, so it's gonna be that travel routine, it's similar where I still hit all the body parts twice a week. It's just condensed. So I do 3 days a week instead of 4. And I'll do an upper body day, lower body day, and a full body day. And this will be, carved out the normal amount of time for these sessions, so I can still get the amount of intensity I want to maintain my personal goals. And then my emergency plan C, if things are really crazy on a trip and I don't have as much time to actually lock in, then I'll still keep the 3-day-a-week routine, the upper body, the lower body, and the full body, but I'll basically cut that time in half. So that way, no matter any scenario that comes up, if I'm gone for a week, I know that specific week I'm not doing my regular routine. If I have time for the regular routine, I will, but more often than not, I'm going to adjust because one, it kind of frees up our frame of mind. It doesn't deprioritize our health. It just lets us accommodate all the craziness that we have going on, from the travels without completely deprioritizing our health. And one thing to note too is if you're constantly on the move, you're going to be relying on plan B and C more often. It'll actually train you to navigate with the chaos while still making progress. And then on the weeks you're home, then you would bump it back up to plan A. That'll be easy. That's no problem at all. I have a whole separate video actually on how I would actually recommend setting up your routine that works for you. This video is more focused on how do we keep that momentum going. And then the other thing I want to note is what I say here is just one piece of the puzzle. This is just training. Nutrition, daily habits, our self-accountability, none of that is listed here. So whether I'm at home, I'm traveling, even if I have a condensed schedule, I'm still walking a lot, I'm still making sure I'm getting in my protein, I'm still making sure I have good sleep habits, I'm staying hydrated, I'm seeing the sunlight, things like that. And then when I'm home, obviously on top of the 4 days, I have my separate cardio sessions and sauna sessions, stuff like that. So that doesn't take into account any of this. But why do I say that? Is because just because we have a plan B and a plan C from a training standpoint, like actually working out, whether that's in your hotel room or in the hotel gym, that doesn't mean that we have to put everything else on the back burner. No, we're not going to deprioritize our health. If on a normal plan from a nutrition standpoint, we normally get, let's say, for me, it would be like 190 to 200 grams of protein when I'm home. When I'm on travel, I'm a little more lenient in that sense too, where it's a plan B and a plan C from that standpoint. I'll get maybe 140, 150 grams a day, which is fine because then when I'm home, I know I have the accountability to get back to my plan A, which is get back to my standard nutrition profile. And if I can't eat enough fruit or veggies that are accessible on certain trips, depending on where I'm going or what kind of trip it is, then I always have my microgreens powder with me. I have my, fish oil, my multivitamin, my creatine. I always take that kind of stuff with me. Well, while it's not perfect, it's a supplement, it still helps to navigate our plan B and our plan C on our travels. So this doesn't negate the fact that we want to completely ignore everything else. We want to make sure we have good habits in place regardless. This is from a strictly training standpoint, because this is what people get flustered on, is they think they have to be in the gym for so long, when realistically, that's not the case at all. And for you, actually, your plan A might be a 3-day routine. Your plan A might be a 3-day routine, 60 minutes in the gym. And then your plan B might be 3 days a week, 45 minutes. Your plan C might be 3 days a week, 30 minutes, or 2 days a week, 45 minutes. Whatever it looks like for you to just get it done and not let the ball roll down the hill, that is what we need to put into place with this framework. And over time, that completely becomes subconscious. You're like, okay, I'm on this trip. Do I have time for my full consolidated routine, or do I have to make it even shorter, my plan C? You kind of make that automatically. And I know these steps almost sound too simple, like really, that's it? And that's exactly the point. Just like your ABCs, it really is that simple, because once you have the framework for yourself, you'll actually do it. And when you actually do it, you never lose your momentum. It's like keeping a campfire going. You'll never throw a whole log on every hour. Sometimes you just need a few twigs to actually keep the flame alive until you can add the big stuff later. But most people let the fire die completely and then wonder why it's so hard to get it started again. Like I said, the goal is always to maintain your gains while traveling. And more importantly, it's to maintain that identity as someone who prioritizes being at their best mentally, physically, so you can perform at your best wherever in the world you are. So give that a shot. I know it takes some mental thought to come up with a plan that works specifically for you. Like I said, I have another video breaking down what I would recommend on how to actually set up the training programs. In short, if you travel 1 to 4 times a month, I would recommend your plan A also be set based on like a primary dumbbell only routine, because you can pretty much have dumbbells anywhere you go in the world. You don't have to modify too much. But anyways, if you want to regain your fitness momentum without, lifting a finger, I created a 7-day fitness roadmap to help business travelers regain their fitness, focus, and energy on the road. It's completely free, and you can chat with me through the whole process of any questions that come up along the way to keep the ball rolling. It's going to be the first link in the description. But if you got some value out of this, you'll like the next one on the screen, and I'll see you in the next video.